Welcome to the IFT Central booth. Our next presentation is about to begin. It's bringing your authentic self to work. And I am introducing the moderator for the program. It's Nancy Akpi Gargula. She is IFT's Director of Diversity and Inclusion. In her role, she leads the strategy for advancing the science of food by leveraging the diversity that exists within the organization and ensuring opportunities for inclusion of all members. Prior to this role, Nancy spent 10 years with the YMCA National Office, educating over 2,600 YMCAs in creating a sustainable culture where all staff and members know and feel that they belong to a cause that transforms lives. In her free time, Nancy enjoys learning about new cultures and ways of thinking, traveling, and cooking up new recipes. What keeps Nancy energized and motivated is the possibility that she can play a small role in helping others be their authentic, best selves, which she believes will ultimately change the world. Nancy, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Welcome, everyone. Happy to see you. And there are plenty of seats in the front, so please feel free to come on down. Don't be shy. We don't bite. So I want to start by saying thank you all for attending. And I have a couple of questions for you, so you can just do a show of hands. How many of you have personally heard or maybe said to yourself, I don't feel like I belong here? I don't feel like I fit. Not for IFT 19, but just in general. Just in general. How many of you maybe tell yourself, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing, fake it till you make it, right? And so, yeah, and I can attest to that too. So authenticity is what it feels like when you can bring your whole self to work, when your behavior matches your intentions. And researchers have found that feeling authentic at the office has been linked to higher engagement, higher workplace satisfaction, better performance, and better overall well-being. That's why authentic leadership has become something of a gold standard at many companies today. And so my role as a Director of Diversity and Inclusion at IFT is to ensure that all attendees, our members, and our staff enter spaces such as IFT 19, where they can be seen and valued for who they are. And so this afternoon, we'll be hearing from 3 science of food professionals, each with their own unique experiences and how they have navigated bringing their authentic self to work. My hope is that at the end of this session, you will come away with a greater understanding of why authenticity matters and how you can lead with it, and encourage others to do so as well. And so typically at the end of a session, they ask if you have questions. I want this to be interactive and I want it to be fun. So as they're answering questions, if you have your own personal question for a panel, please feel free to raise your hand. I will run over to you and we'll make sure we hear your questions. Sound good? All right, so let's get started. Okay. So here are our panels. I'm going to introduce them, and then we'll kick it off. So Luann Blancher is the Sensory Product Insights Manager 2 at Givaudan. I was not even close. Givaudan, and has been a member of IFT for 12 years. A fun fact about Luann is that she ran Division I track and field, and currently is a mentor for 5K runners. So any runners out there that need some mentoring, Luann is your person. Next, we have Jeremy Davies. He is the commercial director at Campton BRI and has been involved with IFT for 12 years. And a fun fact about Jeremy, which I found very interesting, he played competitive rugby until the age of 56. So you said that was about like 2 years ago. And he enjoys oil painting. So very different things. Rugby and oil paintings. Very interesting. And last but not least, Matt Tiergarten is a scientist for pediatric tolerance at Abbott Nutrition and has been a member of IFT for 9 years. And a fun fact about Matt is that he is the Columbus Kickball League champion. He's very athletic. Yes, he was very proud of that. And he also enjoys baking cakes. And he makes a wonderful cake. So if you're interested in having, this is not a plug for cake baking, but he does make some wonderful cakes. I've seen the pictures. All right, so we'll start with our first question, and we'll have Luann start. I'd like each of you to share with the group what being your authentic self means to you, and what does it look like for you in your day-to-day work?
So for me, being your authentic self is actually knowing who you are, knowing yourself, and more importantly, being comfortable with yourself. So you can know yourself, But if you're comfortable in certain situations, talking to certain people, then I think that's when you're really bringing authenticity. In the workplace, how I bring that is I bring a lot of different experiences. So I was born outside of the US, part of my education was outside of the US, and part of my education was in the US. So I really know myself. I know I bring unique experiences. I know I bring a unique thought pattern. So I really try to emphasize that in the workplace.
Right, good afternoon, and you can tell I'm not local, so I'm also a baby boomer, which you probably also can't tell, so that's okay. So authentic self for me is, I believe that you can have more than one authentic self. As was described by Nancy, you know, I love my sport, but I also do arts, and at work I believe that I'm a different person to the person I am at home. My family would not recognize me here working in a professional environment, and I think that's perfectly okay, and I think you can adjust. So I don't think you...
We're going to switch, so use this and just hold a little closer.
Hold it, that better? I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I won't start again. So I think you can have more than one authentic self, and I think... It's gone again? No? But, being comfortable with that ability to switch in and out, I think is really important. Growing up through the 70s and 80s, there are a lot of bad things going on in business and generally, which we're all reading about and hearing about. That doesn't mean that everything that was done in the 70s and 80s was wrong. There were good people, and I think it is all about just that aspect of it. Being a decent individual, listening to people's needs, being respectful, that's what's most important. That's what being authentic for me is about.
So I would definitely echo everything that they said, and I think, you know, more than just knowing yourself, it's appreciating how others see you and how others can work with you as well. So being conscientious, you know, not only how you feel about yourself, but kind of how that might meld with the other personalities at your work. And I think also you need to, you know, realize who you are and embrace the environment at your work. And even, you know, work to make the environment better for you as you learn about yourself or as you know yourself. So, for example, in graduate school, when I first started, you know, I was not out as a gay man. I would cut conversations short with people if anything ventured remotely into that territory. But eventually, you know, I came out and was out at work, and it made things a lot easier for me. So by being myself and bringing my true self to work, it made the relationships with my colleagues and my work a lot easier. But I was in an environment that really embraced that. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of things you can do to be your true self and bring your true self, but it's kind of also integrating that into your organization as well.
All right, thank you all. So second question. So what challenges or barriers have you faced as a result of bringing your authentic self to work, and how are you currently, or how did you work through that challenge or barrier?
So as I said earlier, being from a different country, I bring sometimes a different perspective. I have a different personality type. But you have to realize that when you enter into a world of work, you have to build a level of trust first before anyone can even start to accept your authentic self. So just know that it's going to be, there's going to be a time factor there, there's going to be a process, and just be somewhat patient. Again, as I stated earlier, you have to know yourself and really be comfortable with yourself, but also never compromise on your values. So if you go to a meeting and someone's really not into you or really accepting of you, just be a little bit patient and still honing on your points and kind of validate why you're bringing certain things to the table, you know, why you're bringing certain thought patterns, what makes you accountable, you know, why should someone trust you? And slowly you'll start to see those barriers breaking away, and slowly you'll start to see people accepting who you really are. I'm not saying that it's going to be perfect, and 100% of people probably won't, but know that over time it will get better.
So from my perspective, I mean, Nancy kindly introduced me as a scientist, which I'm not. Okay, so in this environment and in my company, which is filled with very high quality scientists, not having that scientific background is a challenge. My authentic self is, as I say, not scientific. I'm part of the commercial team. I run the commercial team. So I have a different perspective on things. Now that is good for a business, and you need lots of different aspects. And the thing, as I said earlier, is the thing that makes it work is respect and respectful listening and acting together. I think the way I've got over it is time, as you said, Luann. It's about building trust. The observation I would make, though, is that I have my authentic self, which is, as I say, a baby boomer. And a lot of the conversation is about how do we work with millennials? How do we work with Generation Z? And I would just put out there that actually there is a responsibility for those who are Generation Z and are millennials to work out also to respect and understand my authentic self as a baby boomer or a traditionalist. So again, that's just about listening, that's just about respect and understanding and finding out how to work together. In my business, it's taken time and just keeping on repeating the points that I want to make and try and get across and get people to think that I can think differently to them because I've had a very different educational background. And that adds value to the business. And that's what you miss out on if you don't pay respect to that.
So I'm going to come at this from a little bit of a different angle. So I am very lucky right now in terms of bringing my authentic self to work. I truly don't face any significant challenges, I would say. But when I was looking for jobs very recently, I'm only a year into this job, I was very introspective. I think it's the most introspective I've ever been. But just thinking about what type of company I want to look for. And, besides, wanting to work for a company that aligned with my scientific values and that I thought produced, science that I could also get behind. Well, that was very important for me, that they could embrace that side. I was also looking for a company that was conducive to who I am outside of work. So, outside of work, again, I'm gay, so I don't want to work at a company that I can't be openly gay at. I don't want to work for a company necessarily, I was looking at it with this lens, I don't want to work for a company that's in an area, a city that I can't be my authentic self either. So that was really a challenge. There were a lot of really interesting jobs and roles out there, but, I did feel a barrier when I was looking at some of them. I was like, I can't move to this area because I think that I'll face possibly discrimination or something like that. So it was an extra lens that I had to view my life decisions through, and that was a considerable challenge. And I'm glad that it worked out for the better for me. But it's just one of those things that until I had started going through the process, I didn't really realize that I would have to do that.
Thank you all. So that kind of segues into my next question. So today, there are 5 different generations that are in the workforce. So some of you may be experiencing this. So we have the traditionalists, which were born before 1945, our baby boomers, which were born between 1946 and 1964, Gen X between 1965 and 1980, Gen Y, or also known as millennials, between 81 and 95, and Generation Z, 1996 to 2012. So with this in mind, how do you or your companies work to leverage the individual uniqueness that employees bring to work? We can start whoever, yeah.
So I know at Givaudan, something that we do before we start every meeting is to really declare that everyone has a voice and that everyone's voice will be heard and that everybody's opinion counts. And I think by setting that sort of stage before a meeting, it really allows everyone to be comfortable, to know that they can add value and give input on all the matters that are being discussed. Another thing I wanted to point out is that also being your authentic self, especially in a meeting setting, we're scientists, so some of us are very critical, some of us think extrovertedly, so in a meeting setting, ideas are being just generated, and then some of us are very, as my friend likes to describe me, a very critical thinker. So that means you're going to sit back in the meeting and probably at the end you're going to give your ideas, your thoughts, your perspectives. So that's part of being your authentic self. And at Givaudan, as I said, we set the stage by saying, everyone's opinion counts, but also know that you don't need to fit into a particular box in that meeting. If you are not someone who, at the first 5 minutes of hearing of an ideation session, just start to give all your insights immediately and you need to give them at the end, that's also valued. So that's also being part of your authentic self as well, and make sure that you're in a company that really values that.
So from my perspective on this one, the point you make about critical thinking and working with scientists, I tell you, I find it really tough sometimes. I tend to look at things from a more intuitive basis and say, well, that seems about right, let's give that a go. And of course the questions come back in their droves. It's, well, where's the evidence to support that position? Well, I don't know, but it feels about right. Can't we just try it and give it a go? eventually you can, as I say, with the trust build, as you said before, you can get some people on your side which say, yeah, well, okay, well, let's trust you with your gut instinct on this one, and let's give it a go. But I would like to use a sports analogy. I mean, team sports, most team sports require a lot of different skills across the team. And one individual within a team may be a great player, but without everybody else in that team, you can't achieve that end goal, that winning position. So I think it is about making sure that you are utilizing the skill set with everybody around you. And that, from a generational perspective, is about using the experience that's around. A lot of the problems that we see, in my opinion, when we go through booms and busts, it's because a lot of the people who were there last time the bust happened have moved on, or they're not being consulted. And if we did do that, then you might be able to avoid some of these busts when the boom is in its height. So I think it is about, again, making sure we're all working together, making best use of each other's skill sets, recognizing what part we're playing in that team, and that we all have a common goal at the end of the day, and make best use of that.
Totally agree with what they said. And I think I would just expand on it. I think part of how you embrace the diversity is recognizing the larger definition of it. It's more than skin color, it's more than gender, it's more than sexual orientation or anything like that. There's also diversity in thought, as we've talked about as well. So making sure that you have the right people in the room to provide all those diverse perspectives is incredibly important. Something that I've experienced at Abbott, we have some employee affinity networks, and so these are, I think there's a technical term for them.
They're called ERGs, so employee resource groups, or
Yes.
you have BRGs, which are business resource groups.
Yeah, and so they focus on different areas. So for instance, I'm one of the chairs for the Pride group at Abbott, and we create programming. Our motto is actually bring your true self every day. So that actually plays really well into the session, and it's really all about celebrating those different points of diversity and giving people a space to help the organization celebrate that as well. It also provides some developmental opportunities to develop other skills outside your role. But I think that these are a really good resource that some companies have. And if you're at a company right now and are not engaged with it, I would definitely recommend engaging with your employee resource groups, because it's done wonders. I've met so many people across the organization, but you all are coming from a common mindset and able to kind of celebrate the diversity that you're there to represent as well.
Great. All right, so we have time for one more question. So what advice would you give to someone who is looking to show up in an authentic way, but whose organization maybe does not practice a culture of authenticity?
That's a tough one,
Yeah.
right? Because it's really hard if you can't come to work and be your authentic self. Like I said earlier, it really creates a lot of stress for you personally as well. So aside, maybe if you're not in a position to just jump up and leave that role, I think maybe you can start trying to create your own employee resource group. Try to create your own smaller community there, and see if that can grow into something more formal. But even if it doesn't, you at least have some colleagues there that you have, again, similar objectives, like-minded, and you can start to create that community even if it's not already there.
So maybe slightly more controversially from my point of view, I agree absolutely that you can work from within to try and affect change, which is absolutely right. Again, if I use a sports analogy, my apologies, and I'll try and think of American sports. So if you are turning up to play a game wearing your American football gear, and the game that you're going to play is baseball, well, it's not going to end well. So part of that authenticity piece is recognize what game you're going to play, which business are you going to be working in. Are you wearing the right kit to play that game, to contribute positively to what that team is all about? Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. Because as I say, if you're an American wearing an American football kit and you're supposed to be playing baseball, that's a pretty difficult thing to do. Now, part of the change is maybe you can convince that team that they don't want to play American football anymore and they can start playing baseball, or other way around. But sometimes you have to understand that this company is not going to change. And part of your authentic self is to be true to yourself and to give yourself a chance by saying, I've looked, I've tried, and you know what? It's not going to change. Now, I can keep on fighting from the inside, but that's going to make me miserable. And there has to come a point of time, I think, where you have to recognize that I've done everything I can. I feel good about that myself. I need to accept that I'm going to move on because this place just doesn't work for me. And that's not about running away at all. That's staying authentic to yourself. That's following what you believe and not compromising. Yeah? Do try and change from the inside, and you will get success. But sometimes it just doesn't work out that way, I'm afraid. So be honest about that.
So I think Jeremy and Matt brought some really good points. If you have the ability to interview a company before working there, that works. But what if you don't have that ability, right? What if you're stuck there because of family purposes or financial reasons or what's not? Then you really have to strike up a balance. How do you balance bringing your authentic self to work as well as fitting into your company's culture? Right? So what are you willing to make adjustments on? So I'll just use a very simple example. Let's say fashion, okay? So you're a woman who likes to wear very loud, bright colors, but your company is very maybe ultra conservative, right? You have to wear black every day. How can you find a way to bring your authentic self into that? So maybe you wear black every day, but you wear brightly colored lipstick, or you wear a brightly colored shoe, or you wear different earrings. You're still being true to yourself, right? You're still being authentic. You're still bringing color into your life, but now you've kind of balanced it with the work culture. So that's just a very simple, girly example. Sorry for the men out there. I'll find something else. But really, it's just about the balance of how do you balance bringing yourself to work and also being adjustable to your work culture.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes, Bina.
So with regards to adjusting, how do you let's say you're stuck, how do you ensure that while you're adjusting you don't get jaded or you don't feel like you're not passionate anymore or you're losing a bit of yourself through the process?
For me or for everyone? Everyone. Okay. That's a very good question. I think it goes back to kind of Matt's point. You have to find something outside of work that kind of brings you joy, that you know that is kind of like your release, that brings you happiness, so that when you go into work, you are not as jaded. Another thing I think is that you have to find small, little, tiny success projects, right? So maybe it's not a very large, grand project that you're working on, but maybe it's something as simple as changing how the way we celebrate birthdays. Maybe you're bringing, so again, small little steps eventually are going to make a greater impact. And then I think you feel like less jaded, less frustrated in your place of work and in your life.
So I'd go back to the point about I think you can have more than one authentic self. And I think for me, that's where I stayed sane in the early part of my career when perhaps I wasn't in a business that I really fitted into very well. I continued to play the rugby. So you have an outlet. You know, my HR department are delighted that I was playing rugby because I can't take it out on the staff. So it is about having those other outlets and recognizing that you can be a different authentic self. As I say, I hardly speak at home. You know, I listen to what's going on in the family, but I'm not engaging very much in long, complicated conversations. So my family wouldn't recognize what I'm doing here. And I'm a very, you'll be pleased to hear, a very different social animal in the sports arena, if you like. So adjusting, keeping sane, as you say, finding the small things that you can do, balance. I do believe a lot of things in life is about balance and finding the right balance for you.
I don't really have anything to add. I'm a very fresh professional, so I was taking notes on that, so that's a good answer.
Great. Well, I think we're at time. So if there are additional questions, a wonderful panel will be here staying a little bit after. If you have questions, one-on-ones that you want to ask them. Thank you so much for attending. And thank you to our wonderful panel for sharing a little their unique perspective on this topic. There isn't one answer, and so I think we find opportunities to refine and continue to be our best selves every single day. So thank you all so much for attending.